That is a typical problem of keeping C players around, is you're gonna lose the A players because A players do not want to work with C players. So you need to understand that yes, those decisions might be tough. You might have to get creative about how to do things right and how to minimize the impact, but the decision needs to be made, and then you make a plan on how to act on it. And it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if we're talking lovable losers or terrorists. The flavor is different. The principle is exactly the same.
I think the thing here is that tolerating C players, tolerating those toxic people, now that is being watched by everyone in the
Oh
team.
yeah.
They are looking at you not make a decision. So this is reflecting on you as a leader. And over time, the trust and the authority you've got is being eroded away. And you don't want that, because you want as much trust and authority, earned authority in the business as you possibly can. So if you're delaying that decision, you're killing your own culture. Welcome back to CardCast, the podcast where Milan and I choose a card at random from a deck of cards that Milan has created. A pack of cards just like this. Let's shuffle the deck and see what pops out.
Lovable losers. I love that term. I heard it first from Greg Crabtree. And the whole title is Lovable Losers and the Other Ones when I posted it. But when I wrote it, it was a actual quote from Greg Crabtree, which says the lovable losers and the terrorists. And the reason why I couldn't use that in this title is that the search algorithms looked at that title quite unkindly, so I had to go in a different direction. But who are the lovable losers? Who are the terrorists? Have you heard those terms before, Chad?
Yeah, I have. I'm pretty familiar with people who meet those briefs exactly. Absolutely. We see those all the time in the teams that we work with.
So how they're defined? You're the model guy. You're a framework person. So tell us.
Well, let's start with the lovable losers. So these are the people who are pretty innocuous and people normally love. And if we're looking at the the 9 box team assessment tool that we use with the 2 dimensions of core values alignment and performance, the lovable losers are the ones that are probably at the top left. Now, so by our definition, they're C players, although they're probably thought of as more low performing B players, which is the same as a C player.
Yeah.
So what characterizes these people? I mean, they just live the core values. They are always there. They're always shouting for the team, but they're not particularly productive. And they don't necessarily meet their performance objectives at all, ever. But they're nice, and everyone loves them, and they
Yes.
probably chair the social committee. They're probably the ones that organize the Friday afternoon barbecues. Yeah, they're the ones that, if you want to know who can do something in the organization, you can probably go to them and they'll know exactly who to go to. But it's probably not them because they don't do much at all.
Yeah. Well, and often their main claim to fame is that they've been always there, right? They've been a part of forming the culture in the first place, and that's why they fit into it so well. But just because they might have been the right person 10 years ago doesn't mean that they are the right person today, right? Like everybody loves them, everybody cannot imagine the life without them. And that is the problem because once you see the life in the company without it, was like, oh my goodness. Yeah. I think I just had a conversation a few days ago. You said, hey, I wish we let that person stick around for 3 months longer. Said no CEO ever. Right? That
Absolutely. Yeah.
absolutely
Mm.
never happens. Never happens.
Yeah. But it's never that clear cut with a lovable loser, is it? Because, well, they're the life and soul of the organization. So it's really hard to make a call there. And The question we often ask is, would you enthusiastically rehire every single person on your team? And with lovable losers, difficult to say when you're saying it again and again, with lovable losers, the answer to that question is yes.
Or
And then there's a
maybe.
question mark around, would we? Would we? Yeah. So it's difficult. It's difficult doing anything about the lovable losers. But the key thing is you have to do something. And there's a few strategies that you can use to sort of to work lovable losers either back to where they should be, as in at least a B player with a track to being an A player, or maybe somewhere else, maybe a different role in a different organization. But be prepared for a tough conversation because a team won't necessarily support that. Is that the experience you've had?
Absolutely. Look, if we go back to the couch or coach episode, the other way around, that we had with Dr. Carrington Roto, think about the two parts of that problem. One is making the decision that the person shouldn't be there. Because very often you hear, yeah, they're really not the right, but, right? And the reason for them to stay is the but. And that's usually how difficult and painful it would be to act on that decision. And you separate those two. The fact that you're keeping somebody in a position in which they are not A is actually not kind to them either, let alone to their peers, right? Because hey, if that person can be acting in this particular way, like why would I try any harder, right? It's really bringing the whole team down. But I think that the strategy really is to decide first. It's just clear, without any baggage, decide whether they truly are the right person for the position that or for the function that the organization needs, which might not be the position or function that they're doing today because they might have built one around them or there was one actually built around them. And they might be even performing well within it. But what you're saying, when we go to the team assessment, they're the easier to deal with actually, because there is a potential for a horizontal movement, which is simple. It means that, hey, they are the right person for the organization, but not for the role. So now the question is there a role in the organization that we would be hiring for anyway? That's important. We don't create a role for them, but if we have a role that the organization needs, that they would be a perfect hire for, absolutely, as long as the three reasons, the three conditions are fulfilled. A, that role exists, is defined independent on that person, on that candidate. Second, we would be hiring for this role from the outside anyway. And three, if this person shows up out of the outside with everything we know about them and everything that's on their resume, would we enthusiastically hire them for that position? If you answer three times yes, then that's the best possible scenario, because you're retaining somebody who is absolutely, alive with the company values, and you're putting them in the position in which they can be a player and excel. Best of both worlds. Sadly, it doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and something that I've seen quite frequently is that the lovable loser has actually gone out and found something to do to keep themselves busy. They might not be doing their job well, but they're probably doing something else in the organization. And part of that is because they probably realize they're not doing their own job well, so they're trying to look for relevance in the organization, and they've spotted a gap, and they've said, well, okay, no one else is doing this, or no one else is doing this well, I'll just start doing that. It was never part of their job, but over time it becomes part of them, part of their role, part of what they do, and everyone just accepts that. And sometimes they're actually taking on something that is really useful to the organization, in which case you've got a pretty easy decision. Now, why don't you make that their job and liberate them from the thing that they weren't doing so well in the past? And that's a pattern that I've seen a few times, and and you can spot that now when the conversation goes, well, this is my job, but I also do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's not in the job description, it's not in the job specification, but everyone understands that that's what they do.
Yeah. And again, the question is, would we hire somebody else to do that if you weren't be doing that, right? That's the important thing, because just because they do something and just because they do it well doesn't mean that it needs to get done, or that it
Right.
has a
Yeah.
return on the investment or the opportunity cost of that person not doing their job in the first place. But I think that I want to stress one more thing. Talking about lovable losers so badly, and they don't deserve it, because very often it's not their fault,
Yep. Hmm.
right? Because they are so ingrained in the culture of the company, they are doing their best to fulfill it and find it and to be helpful and do all of those things, right? Which is why we love them. That's why they're lovable in the first place. But again, they don't necessarily fit into the design of the organization the way it needs to be. And going back to the fact that we have those two steps in the decision, one is, okay, should this person be here? And second, if so, now what we are going to do about it, the what we are going to do about it is a process. Doesn't mean we're not going to be gentle about it. Doesn't mean that we are not going to be human. Doesn't mean that we won't take into consideration how long they have been here. Doesn't mean that we won't help them find the next thing. Doesn't mean that we won't be generous in our severance if we can afford it, or whatever, whatever that is. This is not inhuman thing. This is not cold. This is just the reality, because again, keeping somebody in a position in which they cannot excel is not kind to them either.
Yeah. 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 And it's a question about having a plan. You need a plan in place, whatever that plan is going to take that individual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hopefully, it's to the right, but not always.
Yeah, sometimes it's out, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the other group.
Yep, yep. So you use the very SEO unfriendly term terrorist, and I get that's language out there, and I've also heard them described in other ways. So someone said to me, "Oh, they're the toxic A players." No, 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 no,
If
no.
you're
No.
toxic, you're not an A player. That's
That's
obvious.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they are toxic C players. They are the ones right at the bottom right of the team assessment chart. Yeah, so they are high performers. They exceed performance.
Do you know why Greg calls them terrorists?
Go ahead.
Because they hold you hostage by their performance.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's that's the idea that the literally is that because we cannot get rid of them because we would lose the sales the person is making, right? Or
Yep.
we cannot do that. The performance is making us blind to the damage they're causing by the other hand when this one is doing this, right? It's crazy. And what is so amazing every time this happens, how you feel the change in the atmosphere in the organization when the person is finally gone. Like when you hear that collective sigh, that deep breath coming out and say, okay, now we can do this, because the performance can always, absolutely always be replaced, be compensated for, but the cultural fit cannot. Toxic personality, somebody who just makes everybody else life miserable, right? We've seen all of those things. We've seen somebody who would be belittling their colleagues, who would be making fun of them, like mock them, who would be rude, and all of them. And just because they were pulling their quota every quarter, they stayed there for 3 years, while 7 other people who could have been a perfect A players left in the meantime, right? That is a typical problem of keeping C players around, is you're gonna lose the A players because A players do not want to work with C players. So you need to understand that, yes, those decisions might be tough, and you might have to get creative about how to do things right and how to minimize the impact, but the decision needs to be made, and then you make a plan on how to act on it. And it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if we're talking lovable losers or terrorists. The flavor is different. The principle is exactly the same.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think the thing here is that tolerating C players, tolerating those toxic people, that is being watched by everyone in the team.
Yeah.
They are looking at you not make a decision. So this is reflecting on you as a leader. And over time, the trust and the authority you've got is being eroded away. And you don't want that, because you want as much trust and authority, earned authority in the business as you possibly can. So if you're delaying that decision, you're killing your own culture. And if you're doing that just to keep a high performer in, then it's a bad call. It's a mistake. And it's a mistake that's going to bite you. It's going to come back and bite you at some point.
Yeah, you're compromising. You're basically saying, on one hand, you're saying, hey, these are our company values and we expect everybody to do them. And then we second, hey, and these are our performance expectations that we expect from somebody, except for these two people who, for whatever reasons, we know that he doesn't really do much, but he's been here for 15 years. And we know that this guy is an a-hole, but you know what, he's pulling this thing. It just means for everybody else that whatever else you say doesn't matter. Right? Because there's always an exception, right? So why would I work this hard, or why would I, let alone if you actually make those people part of your hiring decisions for the next, for the next hires, that's a completely different can of worms. But yes, if you don't have a player team, you're not a player yourself by definition.
Yeah. And it's not always sales. It's not always the high performers, the ones that hit their quotas. I've seen it happen across all sorts of different areas. They're the only ones that can configure the report quickly. They're the only ones that have the technical expertise about the platform that is legacy or unique and indispensable within the business. They're the ones that have that knowledge that puts them in a position of power, which means they feel it's okay to be arseholes.
Yes, very nicely said. I was afraid to use that word. I actually abbreviated. Thank you for going there. That's exactly what I meant.
Well, I think the audience we have, it's probably not under 18. So I think we can use words like that.
Okay, excellent. So both of those, let's go back to the lovable losers and the terrorists, are people who are, by staying in the organization, effectively forcing you to lower your standards. And once you lower your standards, you're lowering there for everybody. One of them is they are doing it on the performance scale because they are overweighting by the culture fit. And then the other ones are lowering it on the culture scale because they are holding you hostage and making your decision really hard on the performance or output piece. Both of them are equally bad. Both of them are really, really difficult to get rid of for reasons we just said. Like if somebody is not performing and they're not culture fit, great. That makes it relatively easy. That's the third quadrant, which we called, how the hell are they still here? Quadrant, right? Because there literally isn't any reason for that. But these two are ones that require some care and require some thinking and require careful planning, but they need to be gone regardless.
Yeah, they either need to move or be gone.
Yep. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And again, it's easier to move for the lovable losers because again, all you need to do is to put them into position. And I'll be strict about those words. Put them into position. I'm not saying find a position. I'm not saying create a position. I'm saying put them into position that you already have and you know that you require that they can excel at. If there is such position, great. That is fantastic. Once you are on the scale, you cannot take the A out. It's just not gonna happen, right? That person just doesn't fit. Ideal team player. It's a fantastic book on that particular topic, right? They're basically talking about specifically that, and that's the first criteria, right? Bringing on somebody or not keeping only people who fit, and they're just not a logical burden on everybody else.